Testing, testing. Hello. Hopefully I won't cough too much on you. My apologies in advance if my voice breaks and I cough a bit. The sickness has been going around. I'm very honored to be here today speaking with you all, and honored to be seated up here with the artists, my team. And I wanted to introduce with just a few brief remarks about the importance of the arts within Native communities. Recent research by First Peoples Fund came up with results that approximately 30% of Native population are artists or are potential artists, meaning that they're involved in making meaningful aesthetic objects and performative works, including music, dance. So the arts are really crucially important to Native communities in terms of continuing cultural values, keeping social fabric together, and also as economic factors in largely rural communities, but also for urban populations of Native communities. Some of the ways that I'm seeing some connections between Western art and art by Native artists are some shared value systems and interests around the relationships between people and land, between people and animals. And we might not always want raven to live in our house or coyote to live in our house, but we like to have the representations to keep the reminders of the importance of the animals and the land and nature within our everyday purview, what we see, what we experience. Even when we're in the comfort and safety of home, we need to be reminded of the things out there that are not necessarily always comfortable or safe. The role that artists play is important in terms of values that we share, ways of giving us the opportunity to talk about values we share. And I wanted to ask our panelists how art has been important in their lives, in their experiences, and what roles do you see artists playing in our social and political realms? Can I have a volunteer?
Well, since I'm sitting right to your right, I'm going to start off. I'm going to be at the other end so I can throw all the questions to Preston and Melanie. Well, first of all, I'm saying I'm very honored to have been asked to speak on the panel today. I'm also to sit alongside my peer, Thelon, who was one of my printmaking instructors at the Institute of American Indian Arts back in 1993. And then also, Preston and I shared a gallery some years ago in Santa Fe. So, and again, that comment that was made about the painting that belonged in Santa Fe, I'm wondering if that was mine. I'm curious, does anybody know that? Well, anyway, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I guess that's not really important, but that's kind of the things Indian artists, Native artists, I think we are continually having to deal with is, what is Indian art? What is Indian art? Is Indian art simply something that is art painted by an Indian person? Or does it have to have the flowing hair and the feathers and the Indians on horseback and teepees? Well, my response to that is, I paint what I know. I was raised in the city, but I had ties to my cultural background and upbringing. I paint the stories of my elders. I paint the songs that I sing. The songs are the tribal songs or Ponca tribal people. We have a very rich history in the the powwow origination. Our powwows have been going on for over 140 years now, which is a modern day powwow today, but we've been celebrating like that. It's been a big family reunion. Those songs and stories that we share and express, that comes out in my art. That's what I want to relate to. That's a part of our oral history. So that's what I paint. I just paint what I know. And like I was visiting with a friend earlier, this show really does inspire me. It does. To see all my fellow artists out there, to be a part and included in such an area that maybe normally I felt like I wasn't part of. But how can you not have Indians in Western art, right? we're part of that very flag committee, so why I wasn't really felt inclusive was just because I didn't participate in that. But since, this is my second year here, but since then I've been in a show at the Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. I was selected to participate in a show there this past fall with some pre-to-West artists, and that was an honor for me too, just to feel like I think we're starting to, there's more of us native artists starting to let our voice be known and our art be known and recognized as such, because we are part of that fiber of the Western art genre. And I'm just glad that I'm fortunate that I'm able to share those stories. That's what I do. That's where I'm coming from as an artist. And I hope I answered your question for that. I'll let Preston and Melanie answer.
All right. Yeah, for me, I also grew up in a rather urban setting, outside of the traditional community where my tribal roots come from, which is Southeast Alaska. So I grew up in Seattle. I grew up wanting to be, a rock musician. It just didn't pan out for me, so I fell back on my art career. I spent many years, and I still play music today. It's a big part of my artistic expression is music, which I'm incorporating traditional Alaskan traditional songs, and then we're doing like a funk jazz interpretation of them. So it was kind of a long way around, but I started as a glass blower. It was right after high school, I started to blow glass, and then I just blew glass with a lot of great artists in Seattle area. It's the biggest community of glass blowers and glass artists in the country. So it grew up around me, and I just got swept up in it. In an effort to make some work that was more distinctive, I looked to my cultural roots, because my great-grandmother was alive until she was 100, and so we had a very close connection with her, and she gave us all Lincoln names, and she was very passionate about explaining where we came from, although English was her second language. She grew up so she died in 1981, but so that had an impression on me. And when I started to do the Clinket designs in glass, it sort of hit a tone with the people. When they were looking at the work, they thought, oh, there's something more going on here rather than the other stuff that I was doing. And so I nurtured those roots, and I reached out to other artists, and they basically taught me how to look at the work. And if you go up into that room back behind you, there's a lot of Northwest Coast art. And so we think of those as our ancestors. We think of those as they represent, Brett was right, the same as in Alaska, all of the songs and the stories and the dances and the art all was symbiotic. It all worked together. And so it represents families, it represents lineage. You have the eagle and the raven within each side of the tribe. You're born into either eagle or raven. And then there's the subgroups that come under those headings. So, and today, the thing is that when we, in the old days, the work was commissioned by the chiefs to be made, the totem poles and objects, and that doesn't happen as much as it used to anymore. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen at all, but it doesn't happen as much. So to be a practicing working artist and to be able to make anything of merit, we were forced to go to the commercial market. And now there's a cultural resurgence that's happening. There's a lot of, re-adopting protocols and so forth, and dance groups are growing in their numbers, and so that's really an exciting thing. And I think too is, there was a lot of protection that was going on, like in Alaska we were disallowed to practice their ceremonies, as most native cultures had that experience. It was trying to force the native people to assimilate, and so therefore a lot of the information disappeared with the smallpox, and a lot of the cultural knowledge was lost, and so we're left to kind of piece it together. And so, and I guess to wrap it up, I guess what I'm doing with glass is I'm trying to advocate for new materials. A lot of people want to look at the work and say, oh, that's not traditional, that doesn't, these people that are the gatekeepers and the curators that want to, quantify whether it is a merit or a value. But I think today you find native artists that are, we're declaring who we are, and we're also operating on different levels and incorporating the modern society, technologies, and thought process.
Laura, could you repeat the question for me?
Why is art important right now, and what role do you see artists playing in our social and political realm? So you just answered the question.
Well, for me, I'm a printmaker primarily. I do sculpture work and painting, and I teach at the University of Colorado Boulder, and so part of the work I do is educating people about finding their path in art making. And I teach my students from, I guess, how I was taught when I was growing up. My grandparents always said that each of you has your own story to tell. That story is really valuable and important. And so how I reach out to people is through my education process. And the work that I make, it's a lot of delving deep into myself as a contemporary Native woman and putting that story into the works I make. The works are very abstract, and I don't really focus on realism too much because I think it's dealing with feelings, emotions, and there's always that stereotype of the spiritual aspect, and that's very much a part of the work that I do. So a lot of times I have people who say, Melanie, you're Navajo, you make weavings, how come you don't make weavings? And I always tell them the story. My grandmother, Thelon, she's passed, and my other grandmother, Nesbayazi, they both were weavers. And my grandmother, Thelon Baldwin, on my mother's side from White Rose, she really didn't have any education. She didn't go to school, so she spoke mostly Navajo. And my parents both only spoke Navajo and some English, and when they went to school, they had a very difficult time in school. So when they brought myself and my two siblings up, we were told that they really wanted us to focus on English to help us going through school. And so that question of, do you speak your language? I always say, well, the boarding school system and the assimilation process really did its job with some of our communities. And I think the stereotypes that we deal with as Indigenous artists of the types of works we make, it hits at a really raw level. And so when I get asked that question, I say, well, it's a long answer. My parents had me learn English first, and I know a lot of Navajo. And when I make my artwork, I remember at a certain point I was making my work, and I went to my grandmother and I said, people are always saying this work isn't native and I should be weaving. And is what I'm doing valid? And my aunt and my mother translated to my grandmother in Navajo. And this is a woman who, again, spoke no English, didn't have a lot of education in our mind, but she responded in this really beautiful way. She said, Melanie, you are weaving. You're weaving thoughts, patterns, you're weaving our story in this new art that you make. I don't know how you're doing it, but that's weaving. Isn't that amazing? So that's my response to people when they say, natives should be doing this or doing that. I tell them, this is my grandmother, and this is how she saw what I do and how it's valid. And the work that I do, choosing an educational path of teaching at the University of Colorado Boulder and having taught at the University of Arizona and Tucson, and a whole list of different places that I work at. It's educating the public about where we're coming from as Indigenous people in this contemporary time and space, and that we are very much connected with our peoples and our communities. And when you're looking at the work, you really just have to take time to meet with the artists. It's just like the rest of the artists here. I'm sure all of you that stood up earlier, you have different questions that people ask you about your work, and you're constantly educating people about why you make the work you make and why it's important to you. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's my answer.
With your agreement here, how about everybody should have one of these at their table?
There's going to be a test. So.
Yes, I'm an art
Read that.
historian, and so I do quizzes. So everyone can see at least one image of your artwork. Would each of you like to explain something about the piece that is illustrated in the brochure?
Sure. My piece is called Little Hummer. I just basically, just the connection that I have with birds. Goes anywhere from hummingbirds to hawks to eagles, and a relationship there. And the particular reason I chose the hummingbird piece is just I'm fascinated with them. That's basically a black-chinned hummingbird. Just the nature of movement of the bird. I have a tendency, I want to be more expressive with my work, and then sometimes I reel it back in, because I've been drawing all my life. And so I have a tendency to just start, okay, I gotta refine this, I gotta detail that, I get overworked basically. And then my wife says, oh, why did you do that? And it looks so, it was more loose and had more movement. I know, I'm trying to recreate that, leave me alone. So I go back in, and I'll start painting back over, and my best friend is my X-Acto knife. I'm continually scraping paint off and adding and scraping and adding. So if you ever look close at my paintings, you'll see all these layers and textures, stuff happening. And now you know, like, oh, you must have been frustrated with that area. Look at all the scraping you did. So you'll see all these different textures happening. But I basically like to do underpainting too. But that particular piece, to create the movement in there, I basically just very design oriented, had these zigzags to represent the movement. There's like, behind his wings, you just see all these flowing lines to resemble the wings. So I just was interested in the movement and trying to define that through design and style, my technique. So that's that particular piece.
Well, this piece, glass sculpture, they called it Pointing to the Sky. This was kind of a reflection of, my take on modernism. It's a big influence on my work, and I spent many years trying to make things in glass that look like the traditional things. Like if you see the exhibition, there's a rattle form which is very closely resembles a kind of traditional rattle. This one in particular is, I think it is more of an organic, spare form that kind of harkens back to Noguchi or Henry Moore or something like that. I read an essay about by a native scholar, Renard Strickland, and he pointed out in one of his essays that it's ironic that the modernists forced us to look at the primitive and appreciate different levels of reality. And a lot of the work that the native people created, all throughout the native cultures, had some kind of connection to some spiritual connection to trying to make sense of man's connections to the universe, and the stars and the moon and what have you, and the natural and the animals. And so this depicts a raven, but it's also kind of playing with those themes of modernism.
The image in this flyer is called Colin Girl, and it's a large monotype. Also, the image on the outside is a woodcut lithograph that I worked on. Both pieces are one-of-a-kind art prints. Colin Girl is a self-portrait of me, and health issues that I've had as you know, I've gone through my life. My dad's side of the family has had a lot of cancer and with, you know, breast cancer and cancer of the uterus. And some years back, I started working on a lot of self-portraits to sort of heal the inside of me and think things into a good way. In our way, my family would always say, you know, there's not so much you can control, but you can always think things in a good way. When you're thinking about things, it pulls things together and puts you forward in a positive way. And so some of the self-portrait pieces are dealing with that self-healing. The image on the outside is a relief print. It actually started here at my residency at the Denver Art Museum a couple years back. We had gotten a series of 30-inch round pieces of wood, and I have, I think, 8 of them that we spent the whole summer carving. And there's images of sea turtles and sheep and deer in that piece, and then a large lithographed image on top, which when I printed this piece, I went to Crow Shadow in Pendleton, Oregon, and worked on that piece with a master printer there. The monotype Colin Girl was printed in collaboration with Karen Kuntz in, I guess it's Lincoln, Nebraska. And she's an amazing printmaking artist and somebody that I really look up to. A lot of the work I do, I travel to a lot of different places around the world, and I collaborate with different artists, and a lot of those travels show up in the work, so they tell this story. The 2 pieces that are in the exhibit are, it's always interesting to talk to people and educate people about printmaking. I think a lot of people think printmaking is a poster, like these are hundreds of prints here, but the work that those of us who are printmakers, who are hand printing on high-grade rag paper, it's very much like a painting, and we go through this long series of making plates to make that print come into being. So that's something I think those of us who are artists in the room, when you've made a fine print, we're always educating the public about what that means. So when people say, oh, there's a print, why is it so expensive? And I explain to them what that entails and the work that goes into it. So that's my work.
How about we continue talking about materials and the significance of your choice of materials and technique in the development processes that Preston and Brent also go through.
I've worked, again, I've worked in the print medium, but I also do paintings, ceramic work, sculpture work. It really depends on the idea or theme that I'm working with. I choose printmaking because historically it was a process that was very democratic and open to the public, and to get an image out to a vast group of people. And print is something that everybody can do. If you have the right teacher, I'm always telling people when they say, I'm not an artist, I don't make art, I always say, you haven't had the right teacher. I pride myself in educating people about how to make a print and to become familiar with your materials and supplies. They become your friend. You speak through the materials to make your work. Again, I can't help but stress that all of us artists who are in the room, we have our favorite brushes, we have our favorite things that we work with, and when you travel somewhere, I know there's certain tools that I have to have with me. There's a relationship I have with them, and then I sort of get to a place and set up my studio and have these key things that just put me into the place of making the work. So when we're speaking about materials, I speak about, I don't know, it sounds like a cliche, but my friends, my tools are very much what help me make my work. Again, I'm not sure if that's a profession, but that's how I understand process and tools.
Well, when I started to, learn or started to apply some of the designs onto the glasswork that I was doing, one of the first pieces I made was this platforms, typically made out of cedar bark or spruce root. As a glass blower, I thought, well, if you turn it upside down, it's just a bowl. It looks very beautiful. It could be like a lampshade or a bowl. So I sandblasted these designs into it, sort of the typical tribal motif, and to the best of my ability. And I told my aunt that I've been working on these pieces, and she was really excited. She came to a holiday open house where this glass studio I worked at, and usually as the assistants we have like a carved table over in the corner, and the owner of the studio has these beautiful pedestals with these nice lights and everything. And she said, my aunt said, well, can we put the hat on the pedestal where this piece is? And I said, yeah, sure. So we took Benjamin's piece down, and I put my hat up there. About 10 people had gathered around to see what would happen. So I put the hat under the light, and then the area that was sandblasted diffused the light, and then allowed these shadows to come through, and they appeared on the pedestal, and everybody went, oh, look at that. And I said, well, yeah, that's what I intended all along. So that for me was the eureka moment, and I realized that the material of glass brings such a unique, property to artwork. If you think of glass blowing, you think of a vase or a bowl or a plate or whatever, but now glass artists are navigating into the sculptural realm, and the things they do are very figurative and narrative. They relate to symbols and stories and things, so that's kind of where I'm going now. And when I realized that I have like a niche that I've carved out for myself, as a glass artist, I started to work glass blowing is a very collaborative effort. To make a good piece, you need a team, and so it's a very team effort, and that collective energy really goes into the piece. And that's why it's really interesting. I like it when artists collaborate with other people, because typically most artists, all they have to do is they don't have to get along with anybody. They can just get along with my paintbrush and my canvas, but as a glass blower, you have to work with people, you have to get along with people, you have to be diplomatic. And so each person brings a very different set of skills to that moment. Sometimes I'll hire somebody who has very specific, very talented in a certain way of working, and sometimes I can get away with working with someone who has less experience. So for me, that's why I stick with the material of glass, because there's so many different ways that you can actually create sculpture with glass, and through a casting process, and so that's why I continue with glass.
Well, I can totally relate to Melanie's comment too about her materials that she uses, her paintbrushes and rollers and things like that. This past summer, I have one particular brush I use to sign all my signature. One brush I use for that. So like a little fine liner. I think I got it in Santa Fe somewhere. But it's my one favorite brush, right? So in the midst of this chaos getting ready for India Market in August, I'm signing paintings, I'm still painting on paintings, and so the next day I come back and okay, just kind of straighten stuff up before we go. Guess where I see my one favorite brush still sitting there. Has paint on it, but it's dried out. I felt like I lost a friend. I was like, I don't know, how can I save this? So I get boiling water and start trying to scrape off the paint best I could. I salvaged it somewhat, but anyway, just having to go through that. It was stressful. See, I was like, I'm going to sign my paintings. Anyway, my materials, I tell everybody, I still like to finger paint. I still get in there and I smear things on my hands. I get in there with charcoals. Back at IA too, Institute of American Indian Arts, when I was learning to paint, that's when I first started really kind of getting into painting, acrylic painting, was I had printmaking. And one of the things I loved about printmaking was monotypes, because it helped me get ideas for my canvas paintings. And so, because I was working on plates and then we run it through a press, how the painting would meld with another color, how things would just come to light. I'd turn everything every which way to look at how things would just come to, I guess, realization for me, and then I try to transfer that to the canvas by my colors. So my colors remain very vivid, my palette's very vivid. I tone things down with a lot of raw sienna, so I'll do a lot of glazing sometimes. Otherwise, my paintings might be all neon, so. But my color palette's very vivid. I like watercolor, just because that's how I feel about life. The most beautiful sunsets. I try to mimic that sometimes in my work. But to me, it's just I can't duplicate what God's created. So I just do my best and try to translate it to my color palette and my canvas. So primarily that's where I work today. Mixed media, incorporate a lot of papers, sometimes just textures, rice papers, things like that, decorative papers for dresses or shirts or things like that. So I'm just very hands-on. I like to experiment, with different things still. Incorporating, I had a woodcut from last year that I did, and I collaged that onto a painting and repainted that. So I'm always experimenting with different things, just because I like to keep it fun and exciting for people. And just like I said again, just seeing the expressiveness of everyone's works in this show just continues to inspire me, and I just continue to look forward to things to come.
So I'm asking this question because I'm an art nerd and an educator, and I'm wondering about the research processes that you all engage in as part of the early steps of preparing new work or a new body of work. What does your research process look like developing the content aspect of your work?
Okay, my research process is I do reference photos. I reference photos a lot, but only for positions and things like that. A lot of times too, when it comes to my figure pieces, and I have to look in the mirror. I'm drawing that on. If I put a hat on, okay, how's the hat look? And so I'm like, or I have my wife and my son model, and I'm like, okay, you guys be still. Just 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. So I'm always referencing for figure pieces, my family and myself, and photos, but just for poses and things like that. My research, like I said, goes back to those songs, those stories, and it's all the idea and how I want to translate that. And I'll give you a quick example. Is a traditional thing let's be back up. One thing I was doing, this is back in the probably mid-90s, we were having a social event. There was a lot of drumming and singing going on. I don't know if anyone here has heard of 49, but it's a social event that usually occurred after powwows. Okay, so we're at this particular 49 social event, and I'm a singer, so obviously I'm singing, and the stars are out, it's beautiful, and the women are singing, the men are singing, everybody's having a good time, and I hear this train off in the background. But yet it didn't deter us from doing what we're doing. We're somewhat in the city setting, kind of. But to me, it made me think back. What if this, because we were singing these songs forever, what if this happened in the early 1800s, so to speak, 1870s, whenever. I was just thinking back to older times. And I was thinking, what if this happened here, Indian gathering back then? Would we have kept doing the same thing? Would it deterred us? What would we have done? So I thought about the iron horse. I thought about the old-time steam engine. So basically, that spawned a painting, which I put the traditional man somewhat, singing. There's a couple of women around, like round dancing, and I put a figure of a train in the background. But they kept doing what they were doing. I put the big starry sky in the background, and to me, it just brought back that traditional, feeling of. But we're going to continue to do our thing. We're still here. We're still doing our thing. So I just kind of combine those two elements of a traditional thought and something that we did and we're doing today, and just kind of combine the two. So that's that particular piece. And back to just my research, like I said, it all just goes back to a thought or a theme. And kind of to backtrack real quick to that first question, you said social and political realms. I just recently completed another painting for Washington. There's a magazine called Education News Weekly, and they commissioned me to do an illustration for an essay that's coming out in a couple weeks dealing with the mascot issue. So I do focus on things like that too when asked, and they're always right there. It just gave me the spark to create this painting. So they told me not to reveal the painting yet until that image comes out, or else I'll be flashing it up here. Check this out, because I've had this idea brewing in my head forever. And when I asked me to create this illustration about this mascot, Redskins, I jumped on it. So anyway, just in a couple weeks, just Google my name and I'll have that. It'll be out there. So anyway, that's all.
So, I think a lot of people don't understand about Northwest Coast Stars. There is a design system that we call it Formline. And you see these sort of oval, bean shapes, and you have like these U shapes, and really, basically, that's there's a system and a balance and proportion that exists in every piece. Once you understand those rules, you can create new designs. I like to equate it almost like with calligraphy. So it's like, for me, my process is about repetition, repetition, repetition. It's easy for me to kind of eclipse my work of 2 or 3 years ago even, because the designs just start flowing once you get into that rhythm of understanding how to create an original design. Then you go into more of the symbolism. And so over the years, I've reached out to different artists or different elders. And one in particular was up from Yakutat, his name is Walter Porter, and he considered himself a mythologist. And he was taking Tlingit stories and he was drawing parallels to other sort of aspects of theology and different spiritual teachings, Buddhism and Hinduism and what have you. So he would take like the Raven story, for instance, is probably the one that you might know about Raven, how Raven got the sun and the moon and the stars and gave it to the world. And so in his way, I don't know, sort of an abbreviated version, the Raven transforms himself into a pine needle and floats down the river, and the daughter of the old man who's hoarding these treasures in his clan house, she drinks this pine needle and swallows it and becomes pregnant. Well, so that's like immaculate conception. And then, anyway, it's a long story, and there's lots of details depending on which clan version you're talking about. But so my current mission is to create the story about, or I want to create an exhibition, or I will create an exhibition, 2017 at the Museum of Glass, and this will be like a kind of an experiential show where you walk through the entire exhibition and each object will tell a portion of the story, the Raven and how he got the sun and moon and the stars. So you're walking through this whole process, and you see the Raven transforming into in human form, and then he gets the sun and moon and stars. And the end of the exhibition will be broad daylight, and that'll become like the origin of the clans and how. So the coming of the light, what happened was that the people, some of them ran off into the forest and became the forest animals, some of them jumped into the water and then became the sea life, and some of them took off into the sky and became the birds. And the people that remained where they were became the Tlingit people. So, and that's one theory of how there was a connection to the different animals, and usually they came at some sort of supernatural experience that somebody had an encounter with one of these animals, and that's where the stories come from. So right now I'm trying to get deeper into the mythology and bring that and show that in different cases. And then in some cases I'll just create something it's hard to create an intense specific piece, and sometimes I'll just get into my studio and I'll just start drawing on something, and all of a sudden, okay, I'll answer the question, and then it becomes maybe more of a decorative piece or one of my modernist kinds of interpretations.
Research. The research that I do for my work is traveling to different communities, meeting with people in my community, and getting to know what the issues are in those communities and bringing those images or stories into the work I make. I think a lot of the research also comes from reading. Reading essays that different art historians have written about us and pondering that and thinking about how we are seen as Native people, and in a sense preparing myself for situations like this. I think when I was going through school, so often I was put into these situations where people had these certain ideas of what a Native person should be or who we should be. And so I think when I started to make my work, it was really important for me to read and devour a lot of different ways of seeing the world and to help educate people again about who we are and where we're coming from, and to do it in a non-threatening manner. I think when I first started making artwork, I made artwork since I was really, really young, but I was in graduate school, and some of the work I was making was very angry and very much in your face. And I remember sometimes I'd have some of that work out there, and people would kind of see the work and be like, wow, angry Native. Sort of just like trying to find the way to the door. And it was interesting because I was reading a lot about our history and what was happening with us, and it was really sad, and just really, I was responding to that, but I started to realize that when I was putting all of that anger and all of that truth into the work, that the people that understood it, they were supportive and they were there, and that was great. But the people who really needed to hear it, they were all the people who sort of left the room because, oh, angry Native. And then I started to realize that I started living with all of this truth and all of this information that was really difficult, and it started to take its toll on my psyche and the way that I was perceiving things. And I remember, again, speaking with my family and my grandmother, because I would show her my artwork and tell her what it was. She was like, wow, that's really, pretty heavy. And I would say, yeah, and she'd say, but how do you feel? And I'd say, well, I really want to make a piece about, my puppies and my dog and things about home and the connections I have with you. And she said, why don't you make that? Like, why are you moving in this other realm? And I said, well, I feel like I need to be talking about these things as a Native person. It's important. And she said, you can do both things. And it's important for you to have that voice, but it's also important for you to heal that side of yourself that's, dealing with this education that we've had to go through. So I think, again, as an artist, and I think it's very important, the role for me that I've chosen to work in academia to help educate people and help everybody find their story. So when I work with my students, depending on where they're coming from, I have this assignment that I always start off with my students. It's a self-identity project and family history project. And they always say, some students always say, my family has no history, I'm not a Native American. And then I ask them, well, does your family get together at Thanksgiving? And they say, yes. And I say, is there a certain dish that somebody in your family makes that's really important? And they say, yes, my grandmother makes this pie that is made this way. And I say, well, tell me about it. So they tell me how she makes this pie or this certain food dish. And then I say, okay, well, let's change that recipe up. And they're just like, what? No, you can't change it. And I'm like, that's your culture. That's who you are. That's part of your being. Make something about that. Find your path. Talk to your family members. Learn your history. And walk that path. Be proud of wherever they're coming from and the stories that they're bringing with them. That's what we do as Native people, as we live through our family stories and we tell them in our artworks. And part of my job and the research I do is working with my students to find their stories. I travel to different places doing workshops to help other people learn about printmaking, learn about finding their path through art making. I don't know, I think that's the research I do. So it's a strange way to answer the question, but because it's very much of who I am and how I work, and again, choosing to work at a mainstream university, at the University of Colorado Boulder, people always say, well, why aren't you teaching at the Institute of American Indian Arts, or you should be on the reservation? And I say, part of my path also is that I'm an Indigenous person, but I'm also a human being. And as humans, we all have a story to tell, and my path is to educate other human beings and to bring us together. And I think that's why being here, this is my first year showing at this event. And those of you who helped make this possible, I just want to thank you for putting this together. And it's a huge undertaking, and it happens every year. And those of us who are Native artists who started to come into the fold of this event, I want to thank you as organizers. Thank you for inviting us and having us have a platform at this luncheon to share with you where we're coming from, because it's through things like this that we start to connect with each other. And again, I'm probably off, but I want to say I love collaborating with artists, so sometimes those of you who are artists, you can contact me at the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm on the website. Come and visit our print shop and visit me, and if you're interested in collaboration, get in touch with me and let's work on something, because I think healing some of the wounds of the past comes through collaboration and working with each other and educating each other slowly about each of our stories. I see the artwork that a lot of you make in the catalog, and when I went to the website, when they kept sending the reminder, send your image, send your bio in. And I think at one point I sent Rose an email like, isn't it fun herding cats? But when I looked at all of your bios and saw the work that a lot of you make, I was just like, wow, this is amazing that we're all showing together, and we're at a point in time where we're coming together as a people, which is wonderful. Thanks, Leon, for asking me to be in this.
Continuing to think about collaborations and relationships, it's a lot of times people assume that collectors and artists are these two different categories. And I started about a year ago asking artists who they collect, and asking, oh, are you a collector? And a lot of artists were hesitant to identify themselves as collectors, but it turned out that everyone I spoke to has their own collection. Sometimes things they bought or traded, but everybody's, we're all sort of hoarders of art supplies and other people's work. And so I was wondering if, how many in the audience are artists and have a collection of other people's work? You can raise your hand. Right, yeah, be proud, come on, be proud. That's a lot of hands coming up. And I think that's, as an art historian, that's an area that hasn't really been examined. There's research and investigation into the collections of prominent collectors, but nobody's really looked that closely at how artists collect each other's work, how that builds social connections and community amongst artists. I wanted to ask each of you if you could tell us something about something that you have that's meaningful to you that is from another artist.
First of all, I don't collect, I barter. I'm just kidding. At the end of a market, hey, come see me, or I'll come see you one way or the other. No, I'm just kidding. I have collected some nice pieces that way. But I do buy, you buy because it moves you, right? And there's a lot of local artists back in Oklahoma that I'll go to arts festivals and shows and that I collect from. Something as inexpensive as $5. I said, wow, that's only $5? I'll take 3 of them, something like, and it's all handmade, and something as much as maybe $300. Just because, I just had to have it, right? So, but some of the artists that I do have in my, I guess you say my collection is a good friend of ours, Kathleen Wall, Penny Singer, C.S. Tarpley, Brent Learned, Anita Padaponi, Tony Tiger. That is an artist. I don't know if y'all are aware of Tony Tiger. It's just not a serial cartoon. Let's see, there's a couple more. Craig George, Marcus Ammerman, Frank Salcido, Margaret Roach Wheeler, Marlo Begay, Connie Seaborn. Anyway, there's some others out there that I'm sure I'm forgetting, but I have, like I said, I have in my home, it's like I'm at the point too where I can't hang it all either. So I just love art, and as much as I enjoy making it, I enjoy collecting it as well. Just because we're artists, and we all need that in our lives. I saw a funny T-shirt. It said, "The earth without art is just eh." I don't know if y'all seen that, but it's kind of fun. But anyway, that's kind of what it's true. It's a very true statement. So it's a fiber of our being. Being an Indian artist, I guess you say, drawing forever. There was a slogan back at IA when I was there. It said, "Creativity is our tradition." Went from utilitarian images. We were just always decorative and illustrating, not illustrating, but just made things for not necessarily beauty at first, but it turned into to be that way just because of our designs and symbolism and things that we want to portray. So anyway, that's what I say.
You got more than I do.
The
The same way, you know, most of my work comes from barters, trades with other, you know, artists who are friends of mine. So we have a lot of blown glass, objects. I can't afford my own work, so I can hardly afford any other work either. But so that's why barter's good. But we have found myself in a position to buy a few things from like auctions. So buy some Czech glass artists, the native glass art, or native artists that I trade with. I like to collect masks, you know, Northwest Coast masks. And I guess one of the most treasured pieces I had was given to me by Joe David, who my mother, when she was 20 years ago, she had dreadlocks. And so she cut them off, and I knew that she probably had them somewhere, so I met Joe David, and I said, I should ask my mom about those dreadlocks. And so he made this incredible mask. It wasn't really like a pretty mask. It was like it was a shaman mask. It was very, the shaman on the Northwest Coast had dreadlocks, and just like the Rastas, I think, you know, they believed that it contained their power. And so, so he made this incredible shaman mask. So I have things like that, and you know, try to once in a while buy a few antique Northwest Coast things just as a steady collection. And then we collect small paintings, very small ones, because you get big ones and then they start to pile up and you can't put them on your wall, you don't have enough wall space, and so that's the extent of my collecting.
I do a lot of collecting. I also curate a lot of different projects with artists around the world. And one of the reasons I started collecting and curating different projects was I had somebody a non-native person in academia once who said to me, your life is so easy as a native artist. You get into all these exhibits, you don't have to do anything. Things are so simple for you. And it really threw me back, and I started to realize that I did have wonderful opportunities, and what I could do with my situation as a native artist was I could become a curator of projects. And I started to look for young up-and-coming artists and invited them into different projects and to feature them in different places, like in Russia, in New Zealand, in Japan. And when I would be invited to teach in France, I would take their work with me and find a collection to place the work into. And so, you know, that comment that was made by somebody saying, you know, your life is easy, I thought, okay, well, how can I turn this and make it into a positive and say, yes, I do get these wonderful opportunities, but I also am giving back to the larger community. And it's just not just Native artists that I work with, it's non-Native artists and Indigenous artists from different parts of the world that I collect and take their work to different places. So again, it's about educating people, but it's also just paying homage to different artists who are in the world now. I often, even though on a teaching salary, it's not so much, but sometimes I'll work out things with artists where I'll do a payment plan, and it might take me 2 or 3 years to pay off a larger piece, but I work on that because I admire that artist and I admire who they are, where they're coming from, and we'll just, slowly work at it. So when people say, that piece is too expensive, I would say, there's a payment plan. You can do it. And then when they say, well, that's not me, and I'm like, well, it's not me either, but I have Denise Wallace earrings, and I have, different things that are at a certain level that people say they can't have. When you value artwork and when you get to know the artist, there's like this huge growth of respect that happens, I think, and that you go to seek out people that will either purchase their work to support them and who they are. I think it's one of the ways, again, I know I brought up Leon, he's right up there a lot, but I love Leon's work. He's an amazing master printer, and I met him a couple of years ago, and I just thought, man, people need to know about this man. And so I spoke with our library acquisitions committee and made sure that we got some of his work into the collection at the University of Colorado in the library. And then, I'd meet different people, and sometimes they'll say, well, we want to do this. And so part of what I do within my collecting is I also try to pair up people to help support young up-and-coming artists or other artists that I really respect. So when people ask me about collecting, I say that's what I do. I do it in this other way, and I find ways to get things. Sometimes it's on a payment plan. And those of you who are seeking to collect work, think about that when you're looking at the artist's work this evening and the days to come. Sometimes the price kind of puts you back, but these works are really amazing that these people make, and I think what I want to go away with is just letting people know that Preston and Brent, these guys are amazing artists, and if you're looking to get some native work, there's a reason why they're here on this panel. Laura has driven up from Santa Fe to moderate this, and it's a unique opportunity that you have today. So try to come and meet them and support their work. I work at a university, so I make my living by teaching. And of course, it's always nice to get a work sold for me because I always put that work back into traveling to New Zealand and doing projects with young Maori printmakers that live on the land there, or traveling to Japan and working with young artists in the community in Japan. So that's how I use the work. When my work sells, people always say, well, did you get this new thing or that thing? And I'm like, no, I have a payment plan on this thing, and I'm going to go here to teach a workshop with young Indigenous students, and part of that workshop, the supplies that are needed are coming from this work that's sold. But Brent and Preston, they're the artists who are out there in the community that are mentors to me and the work that I do. So not to throw a pitch out there, but I just have to say that. Collect these guys.
And I'd like to open it to questions from the audience.
We don't have a microphone, so you all have to stand up and speak loudly. And I would just like to thank Melanie for that lovely introduction to collecting art. So please, but I think what she said is absolutely correct, is that when you sit down with any of the artists and talk to them about their art, it takes on a new meaning. And so FaceTime with artists is a really, really good thing. So.
But one thing I'd like to do, I don't know if it's a question, but if the artists could stand up one more time who are out in the audience.
Artists?
Artists, don't be shy. Yeah, thanks for being here. I think it's really important for us to see you also, and us to get to know each other. It's just, we're part of this art community that is incredibly small, and I love meeting people.
Question? Yeah.
Yeah. How do you, as Native people, like to see Native imagery portrayed by non-Natives? What's your take on that? Looks good. You know, this is a good way.
Yeah, he's asking what our take is on seeing native imagery portrayed by non-natives. Some of it, to me, I always, before I judge, I like to kind of get to see what the person, what he's coming from, what reference. A lot of times when I see native imagery, sometimes the people that are painting really have done their homework. They really have researched, they've befriended sometimes tribal members, and painting what they paint. So I can respect that. I appreciate that. And then sometimes I see stuff that, for lack of a better word, is too romanticized. And that's the pieces of, like I said, that's just here and there, you can really see that sometimes in some imagery. But I don't judge, I take it for what it's worth. But I just always would like to get the background of the person painting. Just as long as things are done, I guess, in a respectful and correct way, and things are portrayed correctly. I still feel that, it's us that should be telling our stories because of where we come from. And when I just see a figurative piece of maybe a towel singing, singing a song, to me that is like more a romanticized version of a portrayal of who we are. But like I said, I accept it for what it's worth. I don't like just cringe when I see work like that. I'm accepting. I don't judge.